our last presenter, before we turn to the questions, our good friend from Gulfstream, Jay Neely. Jay, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. The Gulfstream story on this panel is one of an old new kid on the block. And what I want to go through with you here is a story. It's a success story. It's an economic development success story. So let me start at the beginning. In the beginning for Gulfstream, as a company, back in the 1950s, we were part of Grumman up in New York. And by the mid-1960s, the Gulfstream product line was doing well, and Grumman was ready to build the first jet Gulfstream. The first Gulfstream, the G1, was a turboprop. As part of that, Grumman decided to move operations for that new jet from New York State, where their other operations, where other related operations were located, and build a new factory dedicated to this new product. Savannah, Georgia won that competition, was the beneficiary of that search. Now, I'll tell you, anybody who has been around Savannah, been around Gulfstream, has no doubt heard all the great legends about how Grumman selected Savannah. And they tend to have something to do with executives who like to fish and so on and so forth. Those are great stories, but I'm here to tell you they're just simply not true. The reason that Gulfstream ended up in Savannah, Georgia, was because of good old-fashioned economic development, hard work on the part of the local community and on the part of the state of Georgia. And that work that they did back in the 1960s led to a 1967 opening of the Gulfstream manufacturing plant in Savannah, Georgia, to build that first jet airplane, the G2. 45 years later, the Savannah facility is still the worldwide headquarters for Gulfstream Aerospace. It is still the location where we do all of our research and development for Gulfstream airplanes. So any groovy, nifty, neat technology that you read about in a Gulfstream airplane, you know it's Georgia-born and Georgia-bred. It's also still, 45 years later, the home of our initial phase manufacturing for all of our large cabin business airplanes, and it's the largest aircraft maintenance facility in our network. And you'll hear me talk about aircraft maintenance, and just to plant a flag there, we of course design and build the airplanes, sell them new, but once they go into service, a critical part of our business and a critical part of the logistics portion of our business is making sure we keep those airplanes flying. And to do that, we have a series of aircraft maintenance facilities that are Gulfstream owned and some others that do just that. So we plant the flag in 1967 with, by the way, a little less than 200 people, 200 employees, tiny little thing. From 1967 to about 2006, the business was good to us. We grew from that less than 200 to over 4,000 employees in Savannah. And by that time, by 2006, quite frankly, we had outgrown our then current facilities, and it was time to expand. Like my other colleagues on the panel, when it's time to expand, we did the prudent business thing, and that is we put together a multi-state search and went about that process. And I will tell you, thanks to, and I'm a Georgian, by the way, so I will freely admit my bias as someone who was part of that team. But very much thanks to the hard work of the Savannah Economic Development Authority, other local officials, and the Georgia Department of Economic Development, including, by the way, Chris Clark, who at the time was wearing a Georgia Department of Economic Development hat, Gulfstream was able in 2006 to make an announcement. And that announcement was that we were expanding our Savannah facilities. That expansion would be 1,100 jobs, 1,100 new direct employees, $300 million in investment over 7 years. What did we actually do? What we actually did was 1,500 jobs, $400 million in 3.5 years. And I can't help but note that the 3.5 years after 2006 happens to include the 08-09 time period when things were less than ideal economically in the country. But nevertheless, that's what we were able to do. What did that give us? A host of things, but two key things I do want to point out. Top picture on the screen is our new absolutely state-of-the-art research and development facility. Remember I said that all of Gulfstream's research and development is headquartered out of Georgia. So that new research and development campus, along with state-of-the-art labs, and then on the bottom, a new aircraft service center, 680,000 square feet in that complex, which is, by the way, the largest purpose-built business aircraft facility in the world, right in Savannah, Georgia. All right? So at the end of that 3.5 years, and just a little bit of change, we had another problem. And that problem was we again had run out of room. So we again went forward with a multi-state search, went through the process, and again, thankfully, Savannah Economic Development Authority, the state of Georgia, local officials, and in particular the Department of Economic Development, wonderful to work with, by the way, they were able to come through again and put Gulfstream in a position to announce, on top of what we had already done in 2006, a new expansion that was a 1,000-job commitment, $500 million of investment over a 7-year period. So where are we on that? 2 years down the road. 2 years into that 7-year commitment of 1,000 jobs, over 1,700 direct employees hired. Not promised, hired, working in Savannah right now. The investment's on track, the rest of the project's on track. So let's tie those things together. We started in Savannah, 2006, with about 4,000 employees, more than that, a little bit. I'll get to that in a minute. But through the 2006 and 2010 expansions, we have delivered, again, not promised, not in the future, they are there working today, 3,200 new direct employees, direct full-time employees, on top of what we already had in 2006, and we're very well on our way towards that, ultimately over $900 million in investment. And let me point out that those job numbers, since they are just direct employees, don't count what we call, some people call job shoppers or contract workers, that add an additional over 1,200 workers to get us together with the Savannah and roughly 200 people down in Brunswick to a Georgia population of over 8,600 employees. Remember, we started with less than 200 in 1967. So not a bad investment. And oh, by the way, that does not count the supplier employees that work on campus with us, and there are quite a number, plus the others that are around. So the expansion, and I focused so far on that seed that was planted in 1967, how it grew in Savannah, but it grew not just in Savannah, not just in Brunswick, Georgia, but it grew all around the U.S. We have facilities all across the United States, and it's grown internationally. So by 2011, we had an international network, domestic and international network of facilities, including in particular our service facilities. And again, thankfully, our business has done well, and we're able to continue growing. In 2011, we grew in our logistics needs, very much grew to support our customers via an expansion of an existing Gulfstream Westfield, Massachusetts service center, maintenance service center. Also an expansion in that same year of our existing Luton, England facility, that's just outside London. 2012, we added 2 new international locations because of the tremendous growth on the international front of our sales. A new facility in Sorocaba, Brazil, just outside Sao Paulo. And then finally, in the fourth quarter of last year, a new facility in Beijing, China. That, all of that growth, starting with that little kernel of a facility built by Georgians, attracted by Georgians, and built by Georgians, has grown into a worldwide employee network of over 13,000 employees that are quite literally scattered to all points of the globe to allow us to support that network. So we are very proud to call Georgia home. We are very proud that our friends in Georgia have made it easy. Maybe not easy, but at least you always got us there. You certainly beat the competition to have that key growth here. And thank you very much for that. Thank you to Gretchen and Chris Comiskey and the governor and others. Thank you.
We've got about 2 or 3 minutes for a couple of quick questions, and I will say this. I know Jay's much too classy to do this, but as I look around the room, I can tell some of you want to know. Jay will be around afterwards, and they are taking orders. There's a back order at Gulfstream, but he'll work out a deal for you today, so he is available afterwards to have that conversation. A couple quick questions from the podium, and then we'll see if we've got any from outside. But Mark, Can you tell us a little bit about the long-term prospects of that wood pellet market in Europe? What do y'all see? What's the growth potential over there? Where do you see that going?
Sure. Basically, it varies by country. The European Union has some broad goals to reduce carbon with producing electricity. Each country then adopts specific penalties or incentives or whatever to make the conversion. The UK, as an example, by 2025 wants to have a grid, electric grid with almost no carbon in the chain. They've already, over the last 10 years, reduced their carbon emissions by about 30%. And it's not all going to be wood pellets. It's going to be a combination of renewables and biofuels, and I assume atomic, but I can't speak to that point. But the rules have been set, and they're actually going from right now they're getting subsidized or incentivized to make the transition to biofuels. In a few years, that's going to convert over to being penalized for burning fossil fuels or carbon-intensive fuels. So the future's quite bright for our region and our products and our industry to supply that fuel need for Europe.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Dwight, when you guys were looking for a location, can you just speak briefly about the importance that the Georgia ports played in your decision making as you looked at the infrastructure in Georgia?
Sure. As we looked at primary locations and we looked up and down the East Coast, we looked at those ports that were accessible for the places that these machines needed to go. And one of the largest markets for the machines that I told you about, the mini-hex, was in Europe, and we looked at opportunities there. And quite frankly, the Georgia port actually does provide the adequate infrastructure to help us to move those machines. 30% of those machines will leave that facility and get either be put into a container or on a flatbed to be railroaded over to Europe.
Great, thank you. Jay, you talked about the growth on the international market. What percentage of your sales right now are domestic versus international, and which markets do you believe have the biggest growth potential as you look worldwide?
Thanks, Chris. The Gulfstream market right now is about 50-50, with 50% North American, 50% international. Very important to note that that's a dramatic shift from what it had historically been from the beginning of the industry up until about 01-02, when it was about 80-20, 80% North America, 20% international. With that international growth, we've seen a particular strong growth in the Asia-Pacific region, China certainly, but Brazil, as you saw from the fact that we have new facilities both in Sao Paulo, or outside Sao Paulo, and Beijing. Europe has been good. So frankly, I would say that it's a strong global market. Puts and takes in a given year, but notwithstanding the recession, it's been a strong global market, period.
That's great. Thank you. Ty, now that you've got your next facility coming online in Meriwether County, do you have the infrastructure you need to reach that billion-dollar goal, and what's next for Mando as you continue to grow?
Well, we're going through a transition right now. We started out as more of a distribution company, distributing assemblies, parts that are made in other parts of the Mando Corporation. And we started out as distribution, and then we were primarily focused on assembling components that we brought in from other Mando companies. And currently, starting about 2010, we have started to localize. I mean, everybody talks about currency risk. And when you have a long supply chain, which you could have quality issues that could cost a lot of money. And our chairman, he told us that you develop and you sell and you make and you do everything you need to do for your company at the location that you're at. So when your chairman tells you to do that, I mean, you can't say no. So we decided to localize as many components as we can, and that way we could be in control of our own destiny, more so than anything else. And as we looked, there are some components that we could find or buy locally, and some we couldn't. In case, I mean, Dwight and I were talking about it earlier about casting. It's hard to buy castings at a reasonable price and reasonable condition nowadays in the United States. So we were looking in India and China to buy castings. And we have decided that, we know how to do casting. We have casting plants in Korea and China. So why not do it ourselves? So we have decided that we're going to do as much as we can locally or buy locally. And if we cannot buy locally, then we're going to do it ourselves. So we are building a casting plant across the street from our machining plant in Georgia. So now we are casting, and we are machining, and we are assembling. So our vertical integration is almost complete. Only thing that's missing is we have to put a plating plant together. And Gretchen, that plant, the plating plant needs to be started here in a couple of years. So
start those negotiations this afternoon.
That's right. So that's our near future plan is because our sales has kind of stabilized until 2015, until we reach billion. We are going to localize, and we're going to complete our vertical integration so we can be in control of our own destiny, basically.
Thank you, Ty. I appreciate it. Last question, Dave. I had a lot of questions for you about your supplier network, but I don't want to steal your thunder tomorrow. So instead, I want to shift to a completely different topic for y'all, throw you a little curveball. We hear as we talk to manufacturers all over the country, the lack of soft skills in the workers and the difficulty of trying to find the right workforce to come in to the trade skills that we all used to have that choice on, and we've seemed to move away from that. What are you seeing in your market and your employees and the folks that you're trying to hire in the Fort Valley area?
Definitely, as a manufacturer, it's a issue that's at the forefront for us. As our human capital is one of our most valuable assets, and so, I think we talked about the Quick Start program and some of those things. That, I think as we're looking at our education systems and some of those things that we're looking at in the state of Georgia, the focus on math and science is critical. We need those type of skills, and unfortunately, not everybody's probably going to go to college, but the vocational side, the trades, those type of things are critical for supporting and growing manufacturing in the state. So.
Great. And we'll continue to work on that issue. I want to thank all of you for taking the time today to share with us your thoughts and what you're doing. I lost count. I had about 15,000 jobs between the folks just on the panel today. It's probably a little higher than that in Georgia, but we appreciate your investment in Georgia and all that you do. And Gretchen, we appreciate you and your team out there all over the world every day recruiting companies and helping Georgia companies expand. And I'm sure that Gretchen would be happy to talk to any of you in here if you're interested in relocating your facility to Georgia or expanding what you've got. I'd be remiss, my chairman, Steve Green, has joined us a little bit earlier. So, Steve, thank you for being here, and I'm sure Steve will be around the next day or so. If you haven't had a chance to meet Seth Milliken, who's our new director for the Georgia Transportation Alliance, please do so this evening and tomorrow. And I believe that the reception on the third floor,
yeah, I'll get it.
You're the bartender, right?
Bartender.
You ready? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chris. Well, before I give you your final marching instructions for the evening, first of all, I just want to thank all of you on the panel for doing business here in Georgia and for joining us today here at the Georgia Logistics Summit. And Gretchen and Chris, always good to have you as part of our panels. So we've got about 30 minutes. Sorry we didn't have time. We're right on time. But we don't have any time for questions from the audience. A lot of our panelists will be hanging around. Please come up and ask them the questions that you weren't able to ask now. Email them to us if you didn't get a chance to do that. We're going to meet back upstairs, right outside. There's water pitchers upstairs. There's also bulbers in each of the room. When you outsource your supply chain, when you do a conference like this, it's anyway. You don't have complete control over a lot of your destinies. But there's water bulbers in here. There's water upstairs, and there's some other liquids and beverages for you inside the ballroom, starting in about 20 minutes. So please go visit your sponsors, network, and continue these conversations. And we'll see you upstairs around 5:30. Thanks again.